Hey guys, thank you for joining me for another online yoga class. Today's class is going to be a good night yoga deep stretch, so getting ready for bed either after a long day's work or when you're just feeling fatigued and need time for a deep stretch and a little bit of a chance to reset after your day. So I recommend here that you get into something comfortable, maybe your pajamas if you're preparing to go straight to bed after class, or as well maybe bring yourself a cup of tea, maybe chamomile, something resting that you can take with you, or just set yourself some nice aromatherapy candles, things like this. I'm going to be using a block and a bolster in my practice tonight. If you have some of those or something similar, please feel free to bring those along as well. I hope you enjoy your practice. Namaste. Okay, so we're just going to start in a tabletop position, taking some swooping cat-cow movements just to warm up the body. Notice any places where we're feeling that strain or stress or tension throughout the day. Maybe if you've had a busy day at work, you may feel a little bit tight around the shoulders or in the hips. So we're just going to tune into how we're feeling in the body. So as I said before, maybe just want a bolster or a cushion and a block or books or something to prop yourself up here for allowing ourselves to surrender to the postures a little bit deeper and allowing ourselves to become heavy in the postures and just using the blocks and props to help support us here. So coming onto a tabletop position, so on your hands and knees, wrists underneath shoulders, knees underneath your hips, feet flat out behind you. We're going to move into the traditional cat-cow. So as we inhale, we open the chest, lift the crown of the head, look forward, belly drops down, tailbone reaches up. As we exhale, we round the spine, lift and separate the shoulder blades until the crown of the head releases down. And then take a few more of these at your own pace, but you can also add in some of your own movements as well. So maybe it feels nice to do some circular movements with the hips, also getting that rotation in the spine, moving into the flexion and extension, and also moving from side to side. And then if it feels nice, you can take what we call swooping cat-cows. So planting through the hands as you bend the elbows out to the side, lift the chest through, almost coming into a high cobra. And then as we exhale, we come into a cat position. Inhaling, opening up through the chest, looking up, hips drop down. But really just taking any movements that feel nice to you here. You can have some lateral movements in as well, side to side as we circle the hips. Obviously being mindful of any pains you may feel in the wrists or the knees or the elbows, moving gently. And then as we inhale, we come back to a neutral spine into our tabletop position, wrists underneath shoulders, knees underneath your hips. We're going to move into a Anahatasana, heart melting pose. So you may want to scooch back on your mat a little bit here so you've got space in front of you. You're going to bring your palms of your hands forward and out slightly towards the front corners of the mat. So from here, you can rest your forehead down on a block if it feels more comfortable, or if it reaches, you can release your forehead down towards the earth, maybe beginning to melt your chest down towards the earth. This is heart melting posture or puppy posture, so really focus on allowing the chest to sink, feel the stretch in the fronts of the chest, maybe in the pectorals where the shoulder meets the arm. And feel that nice range of extension through the upper back. Try to breathe deep, inhaling and exhaling through the nose. Allow the breath to travel into the belly as your heart melts down towards the earth. Ensuring here that your hips stay stacked over your knees, they're not pressing back like a child's pose. And just taking a couple more deep breaths, really allowing yourself to surrender to the posture, sink deeply. And then on your next breath, we're going to move into a twist. So looking forward, we're going to bring our left arm underneath our right as we rotate to the right. So as before, you can release your your ear now this time down towards the floor, or if it feels more comfortable, you can rest your ear on a block. Left palm faces up towards the ceiling, and you're still pressing through the palm of the right hand and the fingertips of the right hand. So you're getting that stretch in the right shoulder, but now moving slightly into a twist. Try to keep the hips nice and level so that the movement comes from the thoracic spine, the rib cage, and the shoulders. As we inhale, we come through center, planting the left hand. And as we exhale, we move on to the other side. So right arm comes underneath left shoulder, right ear rests down towards the earth. Continuing to feel the stretch in the left shoulder. Maybe in the back of the right shoulder, the deltoids. Continuing to draw your hips towards level, so that usually means drawing the left hip back, right hip forward. And if you feel unbalanced or your knees are feeling a little bit of stretch, you can always tuck the toes as well, trying to relieve a little bit of pressure. Try to keep the low belly in, breathing into the rib cage here as we twist. Inhale, come through center, press into the hands. And this time, as we exhale, we're going to press back to a child's pose. So bring the hips to the heels. Knees can stay hips distance apart, or you can bring them a little bit wider. Release the forehead down towards the earth or the block. Arms can stay stretched out in front of you, having one last little stretch here for the shoulders. Hopefully this feels good for you, especially if you've done a lot of sitting and rounding through the upper back. This should feel like a nice way of opening up through the front side of the body, ready to reset for the rest of your day, your evening. Setting you up for a good, comfortable night's sleep. And then as we inhale, look forward, press back to a tabletop. We're just going to come into a low lunge position. So bringing the right foot forward to the space between the hands. Keep down on the hands here, pressing through the fingertips, and allow yourself to bring a little bit of movement into the hips. So the left knee is on the floor here. If this feels painful in the knee, you can either support it with a cushion, or if it feels okay, you can lift the back knee up and just take the movements from here. Okay, but otherwise knee is on the floor, top of the foot flat towards the earth. And just bring the hips side to side. Tune into how you're feeling. Maybe you're feeling a stretch in the back of the right leg, probably feeling a stretch in the top front of the left leg. And from here, we're going to move into Ekapada Raja Kapotasana, one leg king pigeon posture. So I'm going to use a block here. If you're super flexible, you may not need one, but I find it allows me to go a little bit deeper into the posture. So you're going to bring your right foot forward. And then from here, there's a couple of different stretches we can take. If anyone's feeling pain in the knee, just wait until I show you the modification. So otherwise, we're going to heel toe, right foot towards the left wrist, right knee drops down towards the right wrist. From here, block underneath the sit bone as you drop your hips down towards the earth, okay? That's the first option. So as you can see, the shin is more towards parallel. You're getting a stretch in the right glute and the external rotators of the hip joint. For a slightly more passive stretch where you feel the stretch more in the left hip, you can bring your right foot in towards the left hip flexors. So the heel is more in line with the left hip. And then wherever we are, as we exhale, maybe we begin to fold forward if it feels nice, either onto the forearms, or release the forehead down towards the earth. If anyone's feeling pain in the knee, reclined pigeon is a lovely variation. So just coming down to lay on your back. Right ankle crosses over the left thigh. You can stay here or begin to draw the left thigh in towards the chest, interlacing the fingers around the thigh, or maybe interlacing the fingers around the shin. Whichever variation you're in, hopefully you're feeling a stretch either in the right glute, so the top of the right thigh, or the front of the left leg. So as long as you're feeling a stretch in either one of these places, this posture is going to be really beneficial to you. And what you don't want to be feeling is strain in the knee as we're working with opening the hip joint, if the knee joint is taking the pain or even the ankle joint is taking the pain, it's not going to help open up through the hip. All that's going to happen is you're going to possibly damage the really sensitive tissues of the knee joint. So allow the breath to shallow. Make sure you're moved into a position that feels comfortable. You can allow your body to rest and reset while still getting the benefit of the stretch. But you should be able to maintain a steady breath practice, no strain in the jaw, no strain in the forehead. Deep Ujjayi breathing in and out through the nose. As we inhale, look forward. Begin to slowly, as you like, walk the hands back up. And then just, if you had the block, release the block from underneath your right thigh. And we're going to press back to a tabletop position. And I just like to stretch out the legs here. That may feel good to you, so maybe press the heel back, taking any movements that feel nice in that right hip before we come into the other side. So bringing your left foot forward now to the space between the hands. We're going to be bringing that movement into the hip joint. So keeping the fingertips either tented, or you can bring the hands flat to the floor if that feels more comfortable. As I said, cushion under the right knee if that feels painful, or even begin to lift the knee off the floor. Begin to sink down into the hips, maybe begin to bend and straighten the left leg, making sure that the left knee stays stacked over the left ankle as we bring some movement into the hip joint, just to establish the different movements that feel nice in your hips. So maybe you're feeling it more in the right hip, maybe you're feeling it in the back of the left leg, maybe you're feeling it more as you drop the hips side to side in the outer edges of either hip, or the insides of the thigh. I just like to take a note of where you're feeling the stretch the most, because usually this means it's the place that we want to work on the most. Not always, but usually. And then when you're ready, we're going to move into Ekapada Raja Kapotasana on this side. So again, the first option is to heel toe the left foot over to the right wrist, drop the left knee down towards the left wrist, placing a block underneath the thigh if you need to. You may not need to. Right leg can scooch back behind you, staying up on the fingertips is the first choice. Second option is to bring the foot more in line with the right hip and staying up on the fingertips. And then finally, if you'd like to, as you exhale, whichever variation you're in, you can draw the elbows down towards the earth, or maybe bring the forehead to the backs of the hands. Remember, we're looking for the stretch either in the outer edge of the left hip or the top front of the right thigh. So if you're not feeling the stretch here, if you're feeling it either in the knee or maybe even in the ankle, then come into the reclined version on your back. Left knee on the top of the right thigh, left ankle on the top of the right thigh towards the knee. And stay here, or begin to draw the thigh or the shin in towards the chest. Again, trying to isolate the stretch into the left hip, not into the knee. Steady your breathing wherever you are. And as best you can, we're trying to keep our hips level. So if you've noticed that that left hip is rolling off to one side, I recommend that you support it with a cushion or a block. If you don't have one of those, then you're just going to have to use your hands to help you stay balanced as you keep the pelvis nice and square. Both hip points should be facing the short edge of the mat. And you can always tuck the toes under on the right foot to help you stabilize this posture, help you stay a little bit more balanced. And then when you're ready, begin to slowly walk your hands back up. Coming back into our tabletop, so releasing the block from underneath the left thigh. You can either tuck the toes under on the right and press back, or just take as many shuffles as you need to get back into your tabletop, and take any movements that feel good in that left leg. And then when you're ready, we're just going to come to sit down on our heels, extend the legs out in front. We're going to come into Gomukhasana, cow face pose. So this is another opening in the hip. So the first option, I'll give you plenty of options here because we want to keep the knees nice and safe, is to come into a cross legs position, working with this, opening up if this already feels like a stretch for you. Second option, as we come into either side, I'll just show you this. So when we move into the right side, we bring the right ankle on top of the left thigh, similar to how we did in pigeon. And then you can draw that left knee in, either taking a hold of the back of the thigh, or as we get more open, begin to interlace the fingers around the shin, again isolating the stretch into the hip joint, not into the right knee. Okay, so that's the second option. Lastly, if you wanted to attempt to come into Gomukhasana, we're going to bring the left leg, so the left knee is facing towards the midline as best as possible, trying to keep the pelvis nice and balanced, the hips nice and grounded. You can bring the right leg up and over the top. Again, trying to establish the foundations, grounding through both sit bones. You stack your right knee over the top of the left. So hopefully feeling a stretch in both sit bones here. Okay, you can interlace your fingers, place them over the top of the right knee. If you wanted to take a little bit more of a deep hip stretch, you can bring the hands to the outside of the hips, work with lengthening the spine, or maybe beginning to ultimately fold forward, even bringing the hands out in front as we release the forehead down. Okay, but we're aiming to isolate the stretch into the right and the left hip. So you should be feeling it on the outsides of the hips towards the butt. If you're feeling it in the knee, ankles, then just come into one of the previous offers of the posture. And now peace, quiet, calm the breathing, relax. If you're feeling nice and open in this posture and it feels like a nice release, you can begin to place the bolster on top of the knee and release the forehead down towards the bolster. And just ensuring this doesn't bring any tension into the knee joint. And then as we inhale, if you are folded forward, come all the way back to center. Take the movement slowly, bring one knee at a time back to center. Release, shake them out if you need to. And we'll come into it on the other side. So this time, again, first option is to come into a cross legs position, just alternate the cross of the feet. The second option is to extend the right leg out in front, place the left ankle on top of the right thigh, just above the knee, beginning to work that right leg in, either just taking a hold of the back of the thigh or maybe around the shin. But again, isolating the stretch in the left hip joint as we try to stay nice and tall through the spine. And lastly, if you're feeling it, Gomukhasana on this side. So starting off with the right knee towards the midline, bring the left foot up and over, ultimately stacking the knees over each other, grounding through the pelvis. Both sit bones are nice and grounded into the mat. Hands can interlace on top of the knee, gently pressing it open. Place the hands to the outside of the hips to lengthen the spine. Press forward maybe as we exhale, or ultimately bringing the hands out in front. And then as we allow ourselves to surrender, we become comfortable in the position, maybe begin to use a bolster or a cushion to release the forehead down. Being mindful of especially the left knee joint. No pain, no sensation in the knee. And as we inhale, come all the way back up to center. Release the bolster if you had one. Bring the knees back to center one at a time. Try to be mindful as we release out of these postures. Release the legs and shake them out if you need to. We're going to come into Baddha Konasana now, bound angle pose. So as we inhale, bring both knees in towards the chest. As we exhale, we open the knees out to the side. So if you have your props, your blocks, and your knees don't reach the floor, they very rarely do reach the floor, but if they don't reach the floor and it's uncomfortable, then you can just prop up your knees with the props, and that works really well. So we've done a lot of stretches for the external rotators, the deep six lateral external rotators in the hip joints. We're now going to be working, as well as those, the adductor muscles, so the inner thighs. Hopefully as you're working here, you're feeling a stretch along the inner thighs. This is another area where after a long day of work, especially if you're doing a lot of walking, standing or sitting, this can get quite tight, as well as commonly known in the hamstrings can get quite tight. So we're just going to open these up. You can work with interlacing the fingers around the big toes, lengthening the spine and lifting the chest. Or if you wanted to take it into a slightly deeper forward fold, as we exhale, bring the elbows in towards the hip creases. Looking forward to start with, stay nice and long through the spine. And as we get more comfortable in the position, again, maybe it feels nice, or if you have the mobility, you can rest your forehead down on towards the bolster. Make sure if you're releasing your head down that you don't feel any pain in the lower back. If you do feel any pain or a strong sensation in the lower or middle back, I recommend that instead you just work with lifting your chest and looking forward, continuing to draw the shoulders away from the ears. Make sure that you stay nice and tall through the spine. You don't want to be compressing your lower back. You want to be feeling the sensation in the inner thighs, maybe the outer edge of the hips. And take one more deep full breath. Inhale, come all the way back up to center. Bring the knees to center, release the block. And exhale to release. We're just going to take one little hamstring stretch. As I said, these get quite tight with working long hours, especially if you're walking or sitting a lot. So I'm going to take a slightly more passive variation of the posture. I would recommend here that you can, if you have a bolster, it's really going to be lovely to use. Otherwise, we're just going to work with sandwiching. So bringing the knees in towards the chest, sandwiching the thighs and the belly together. And then from here, you can slowly start to extend the legs out in front. So that may not look like much. It may just kind of get to about here, and that's fine. If you have a bolster or a block, you can place it under the knees for support as you release the head down, as long as you're feeling a stretch in the backs of the legs. Maybe if you're slightly more open and the legs begin to reach towards straight, then what you can do is place the bolster lengthways along the legs, the tops of the legs, and release your forehead down towards the bolster. But again, if you're feeling any pain or strain in your lower back, I recommend instead that you look forward towards the toes and just stay nice and long through the lower back. Otherwise, begin to allow yourself to gently round, feeling the stretch along the backs of the legs, maybe allowing yourself to go a little bit deeper as the backs of the legs open up. Maybe ultimately you can remove the bolster and just rest down on towards the legs.
taking one more deep breath. Inhale, slowly coming up. Release the bolster if you had one. We're now going to come into a supported bridge pose. So this is one I really do recommend you have blocks for. It makes it really truly passive. If you don't have blocks, try and grab yourself a cushion or something. If not, you can do it without, but try to avoid really squeezing the glutes and try and stay in a more passive position as you lay down. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down to lay on our backs. We're going to bring our our heels in towards our sit bones. Knees, hips and ankles are all in line with each other. Make sure the knees stay hips distance apart. Have your block or your prop ready. As you inhale, we lift the hips up, and you want to place the block underneath the sacrum, which is the flat part of the spine just above the bottom. So you don't want to be placing it on the curvature of the spine itself. Okay, from here, if you feel stable, you can release your arms alongside the body with the palms facing up, just checking in that you feel nice and open through the chest. The shoulders begin to melt away. The chin draws away from the chest to create space along the front of the throat. And your knees stay hips distance apart. So you can have your block or your prop on any setting that feels good to you, but you want to be moving into a position where you feel a stretch along the front side of the body, but you don't want compression in your lower back. You want to remain nice and open through the length of the spine. As best you can, you breathe deep into your chest. Exhale fully. As we inhale, lift the hips just a little bit to release the prop from underneath you, and exhale, very gently, one vertebrae at a time, release down. And then from here, draw the knees in towards the chest, give them a little squeeze in towards your heart. Take any last movements that your body needs before we come into our Shavasana. So if you are practicing this just before bedtime, maybe now is a good opportunity to get into bed. Otherwise, just working with our Shavasana, you can stay with your arms around your shins for a little bit longer, or any last movements that your body needs. Or you can begin to release, extending your legs long. If you've got a bolster, you could place the bolster underneath the backs of the knees for a little bit of extra bonus support. If you have a cushion, that may feel nice to place underneath your head, but try to remain nice and open through the front of the throat. Release your arms alongside the body with the palms facing up. Slowly close your eyes. Allow the breath to deepen naturally. Release any places where you feel strain or stress. The fingertips, the toes, the jaw, the cheeks, all of those tiny muscles around the eyelids and the eyebrows, the forehead. And allow yourself to move into a position of stillness and grounding where your body can rest, process the day's work it's done. Allow the breathing to calm and allow the mind to quiet. Your mind does so much for you all day and every day. Just give it the next few minutes of complete rest. And I recommend here that you stay in your Shavasana for at least 3 minutes, up to 8 hours if you'd like. Today, as you go forward, I wish you peace in your thoughts, peace in your words, and peace in your heart. Namaste.